video, we are going to review the forms that we have for nouns and adjectives by the declensions that we have learned so far. All nouns belong to a certain category called declensions. We have first declension nouns, are so called because they have first declension endings. Second declension nouns with second declension endings, and third declension nouns. And I have an example of each one up here on the board. To this point, we should be familiar with the forms of the nominative, which would be the subject, and we should know that the endings for the first declension would be an A for puella, a US for servus, but remember the six that do not have an ending US in the nominative. They include puer, wir, ager, magister, minister, and liber. And then, of course, third declension words in the nominative subject or predicate nominative are not going to have an ending whatsoever. And by the way, in this short video, I'm going to be naming 3 Georgia cities at random, and by putting in those 3 Georgia cities into a quiz on Canvas, you'll be earning yourself a free 100 for watching this. Now, we have also encountered the genitive singular. And remember that the genitive is the case that shows possession. And so whenever we have a word in the genitive, you will translate it of that thing or that thing's whatever. And we should know the endings of the first declension, be ae, puelli, exact same as the nominative plural that we have seen. And you will know the difference between the two of them by virtue of its context as to whether it is of the girl, singular, or the girls do something. It's the same thing in the second declension, of the slave, or the slaves is whatever, singular, versus the slave's verb, do something. And then, of course, short is, of the tree, or the trees, whatever. And then, of course, it, unlike the first and second, does not have the same ending in the third nominative plural. That would be, of course, arbores. The accusative we are also familiar with, the direct object. And just in the same way, you cannot simply say the girl, but rather you must say puella, the girl does something, verbs. Here you must say something verbs the girl, or the subject verbs the girl. It would be, of course, as we have learned, puellam, servum, and for the third declension, arborem. For the plurality, it would be, of course, puellas, with a long as, servos, with a long os, and arbores. And remember, they are the same in their form, but context will let us know whether it's functioning as the subject or the direct object. Now, there is a new case that we need to learn, and this new case is a case that is known as the ablative. Now, we are also going to be adding another case called the dative, but ablative is most important for this chapter and this time because it is the accusative and the ablative case that all objects of prepositions are going to have. So, over here on the right-hand side are some prepositions that we have learned so far. You probably learned about prepositions in middle school or before that indicate all the things that a plane could do to a cloud, a squirrel can do to a tree, that sort of stuff like that. But it is a word that expresses a spatial relationship between things. And we have learned in, under, out of, into, because in can sometimes mean in, sometimes it means into, through, towards, near. But as I say each one of those words, near what? Under what? And depending upon the preposition, its object is either going to be in the accusative case. So now we know another use of the accusative, not just direct object, but objects of certain prepositions. The same exact way that ablative now is going to be objects of certain prepositions. So let's learn those new endings. I will put down the stems once more. Puel, ser, arbor, and we'll do it again. Puel, ser, and arbor. And by the way, your first city of Georgia is Macon. M-A-C-O-N. Macon. Now, the endings then for the ablative are going to be the following. Now, we've actually seen these before, but we did not notice them. But here it is going to be puella, just in the exact same way that we have seen in wila, which would be in the country house as opposed to in plus accusative into the country house. It would be along o, servo, in the same way that we have seen in horto, in the garden, and arbore. In that we have seen, sub arbore. So we've actually seen all of these endings before, and we saw them when in fact that word in the ablative was functioning as the object of the preposition. That word in the ablative is functioning as the object of the preposition, and that word in the ablative is functioning as the object of the preposition. In the plurality, it is going to be puellis, and we have seen in wheelies, rusticis. I forget the chapter exactly, but I think it was around chapter 5 in the country 5 country houses. It is also a long is for the ablative, and we have seen in chapter 2, I think it was, in agris, in the same way that we saw exagris, second declension. And then finally, over here, the ending is ibus. And so in chapter 9 is incredibly important to be aware of all of these endings of the accusative and the ablative, because they are the forms, and the only forms, that a word would be if it is functioning as the object of a preposition. You could never say in puella or ad servus. It would have to be ad servum or in puella, and so forth and so on. But while we're at it, we should go ahead and add the other case endings so that we are, at this point, going to be familiar with all of the forms of the first, second, and third declension, masculine and feminine. So let's go ahead and add into the mix the genitive plural. Now we've seen the genitive singular, obviously, puellae servi arboris, but now the genitive plural. And so instead of the girl, it'll be of the girls. Instead of the slave, it would be of the slaves, and so forth and so on. So I'll go ahead and add the stem puel, the stem ser, the stem arbor, and add the endings to indicate the plural genitive of the girls, or the girls, whatever. Puellarum, for of the slaves, servorum, and of the trees, arborum. Now this is a dangerous form. And what makes it a dangerous form is that people look at a third declension word, arborum, they think they see um, which they do, but they don't think genitive plural. They think accusative singular. And why would they do that? Because we've seen um indicate accusative singular. But you have to be aware, when you see a um, whether it is appearing as a second declension ending on a second declension word, or if it is appearing as a third declension, genitive plural, on a third declension word. And so, please be aware of those new endings as well. That leaves one more case. And that case is what we call the dative case. D-A-T, D-A-T-I-V-E. And again, the dative case in the plurality. And just like for the genitive, that you can translate it of or apostrophe s to show possession, the dative case, and we're not going to talk about it now, but in the future we will, is the case that an indirect object is expressed. The indirect object is the receiver of the direct object. I give the candy, I the subject, give the action, candy, the direct object, to the student. The indirect object receiving that direct object, candy. And so in that way, the dative words are going to be translated to whatever, to the student, or for whatever. And so, going through and putting down our stems once more, puel, ser, arbor, let's do it again for the plurality, puel, ser, arbor. We then can add our dative singular and dative plural endings. And that completes all the cases that you need to know except for the vocative. But remember why I leave it out is because the vocative is almost always the same as the nominative, except second declension words that end with US, and we talked about that at length previously. By the way, your second city of Georgia is Rome. Of course it will be Rome. Rome, Georgia. So, these are our dative endings. So here it is going to be, again, an AE. So now we see that whenever you see puelli, it might be of the girl, it might be to or for the girl, or it could be the girls do something. And how are we going to know? The context will let us. For to or for the slave, servo. So here you can see, obviously, identical. How do you know whether it's dative? How do you know whether it's ablative? Well, obviously context will help you figure it out, and I'll talk more about that at length later. And here it is arbori. Now again, just like with arborum, that's dangerous. Because let's say instead of a tree, we got father, which is also a third declension word. People see patrie and they want to say that the fathers do something. That is wrong. If it were the fathers do something, it would be the patres. They look at patrie, they see a long I, and they think nominative, plural. But that's not true, because long I can indicate nominative, plural, but only for a second declension noun, not a third declension noun. So please be aware of the dangers of long I and um as an ending if you are not aware of what declension the word will be. For the plural, it is dative puellis. So note, dative plural, ablative plural, identical. How are you going to know whether it is to or for the girls, or girls in the ablative? Context. Exactly the same in the second declension, identical to the ablative, and exactly the same in the third declension, identical to the ablative. Now, last thing before I point out an easier way to recognize or memorize these forms is that in the exact same way that we have to translate genitives of or apostrophe s and datives to or for, ablatives you have to translate it in a whole host of options. You could say by the girl slave tree, with the girl slave tree, because the girl slave tree, by, with, because of, from girl slave tree, in girl slave tree, on girl slave tree, at. By, with, because of, from, in, on, at. Same thing down here. By, with, because of, from, in, on, at. The question is how? Well, one is that if it's the object of a preposition, that will help us to know. Or context. We have seen this before with arbore in the form of nomen chapter 1. We didn't say name, we said by name. Could have also said with the name. Likewise, aistate, third declension ablative ending. In the summer. You couldn't simply say summer, you had to say in the summer. Now, we're going to be doing this a lot. And moving forward, we're going to be having a lot, and I mean a lot, of quizzes of our endings. And that is because it is absolutely overwhelmingly crucial that you memorize all of them. I know it seems like a lot right now, but it really isn't. Especially when you recognize patterns. Look at the pattern that we already see here in the accusative. M, M, M. Or in the accusative plural, long letter S, long letter S, long letter S. Likewise, look at the ablative pattern. Singular letter, singular letter, singular letter. And, obviously, in the genitive plural, do you see UM? Yeah. UM, UM, and so forth and so on. So there are patterns to be had. However, what we do, and we do it a lot, in the exact same way that we might say OST, must, test, anti for verbs, or sum ss, sumus est sunt for the verb sum esse, we will sing the declension songs over and over. And for the first declension, we are going to learn the declension song, which I hate. I would infinitely rather you simply learn your endings. But one way that helps you to do so is to obviously sing these songs. But the point is not to memorize the chart of endings. The point is not to memorize the stupid songs that I don't even like. The point is for me to put in front of you in a passage a word of a particular case, and you recognize that case almost immediately, and then know what that is implying. For example, if I were to randomly write down a word, and I'll do it over here, and I were to write down, let's say I go with, how about, immediately I want you to look at that word and say, that is second declension, either dative or ablative singular. So it's either to or for the stream, or by, with, because of, from, in, on, at the stream. Let me look at the rest of the context. Or, to take another word that we have encountered previously, if you were to look at something like, right here, I want you to look at that, and I want you to immediately say, yes, that is genitive plural of mother, because I know that mother is a third declension word, and that is not the accusative, because your eyes might have bugged out a second when you looked at that. So wait, why did he put a masculine ending on this feminine word that means mother? No, I did not. But you have to learn your endings. And doing so, these silly songs have been of help to students previously. And so for the first declension, you are going to sing to the tune of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or the alphabet song. And you will say, A, E, M, long A, E, A, R, U, M, I, S, A, S, I, S, 2. Now the first declension is through. Do I want you to sing that song? I don't care. Do I care that you memorize it? No. I want you to learn the forms. That's the part that is important. Now for the second declension, there is also a tune, but it is the tune of Jingle Bells. And so you would say, Oos, E, O, O, E, Orm, Ees, Os, Ees. And again, Oos, E, O, O, E, Orm, Ees, Os, Ees. And thus, second declension endings. For the third declension, and again, I don't care about the songs, I don't care about the chart, I don't want you to memorize a chart, I want you to know your endings. And the best way to do this is to make flashcards, and I'll tell you more about that in class. And then finally, for tree, we can't say anything for an ending here, so we just say variant, because it varies from word to word, no ending. Variant I-S, I-E-M-E, ace, ibis, ace, ibis, and again, variant I-S, I-E-M-E, ace, ibis, ace, ibis. And these are your endings expanded for all the cases that we are going to learn in all three declensions, masculine and feminine. Your last Georgia city is Valdosta, V-A-L-D-O-S-T-A. Thank you for watching. Sing your songs and learn your endings most of all.